Welcome to the regular meeting of the Planning Commission on Tuesday, June 14th, 2022. This meeting is called to order. I'll request staff to call the roll for the commissioners who are present and not.
Thank you. Commissioner Harris. Here. Commissioner Hagman.
Here.
Commissioner Mercado is absent. Commissioner Samudzi is currently absent. Commissioner Schock. Here. And Vice Chair, Acting Chair Saudi.
I'm here. Great. So we'll go ahead and move on to the order of the agenda. Are there any changes to the order of the agenda that anyone would like to make? Okay, noted. Next, we'll move on to the meeting procedures. Due to the COVID-19 shelter in place, we have established new ways of conducting public meetings. I'd like to ask staff to address how public comment will work this evening.
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Chair Saudi. At this time, I'd like everyone other than the commissioners to turn their cameras off until it is your turn to present. Thank you. This meeting is being recorded and streamed live to YouTube. Viewers are welcome to attend by telephone by calling 669-900-9128 and entering the meeting ID, which is 897-4566-6511#, or watch directly through Zoom using the link on the agenda. If you are participating by telephone tonight and wish to provide comments, please press *9 when the chair opens the public comment period to raise your hand. Once you hear a notification that the host is inviting you to speak, please press *6 to unmute yourself. At the chair's discretion, you will have up to 3 minutes to speak. If you submitted comments prior to the meeting by email or letter, it has been forwarded to the Planning Commission. Closed captioning is available for this meeting and the link is on YouTube. In addition, for increased accessibility, tonight we are testing out the Zoom live transcript feature for closed captioning. For closed captioning, please click on the live transcript at the bottom of your Zoom screen. Thank you. Oh, you're on mute.
Of course. I'm just going to ask the applicants that still have their cameras on, if they can go ahead and turn off their cameras until we call the agenda item, that'd be great. Thank you. Okay. Let me now describe the meeting procedures. We'll begin with the staff report. Then we will hear from the applicant. Applicant, please try to keep your presentation to no more than 10 minutes. Members of the public will then be invited to speak. People on conference call can speak when they receive the notification they have been asked to unmute themselves. Please keep comments to 3 minutes. Members of the public will then be invited to speak. People on the conference call can speak when they receive the notifications they have been asked to unmute themselves. Please keep comments to 3 minutes. Commission and Design Review Board representatives will have the opportunity to ask questions of the staff, applicant, or public after this segment. We will then close the public hearing and bring the matter back to the Design Review Board representatives for discussion and recommendation, and then to the Commission for discussion and action if necessary. Any questions? I know this is a little different than what we've done in the past. Okay, anyone with urgent communications not on the topic of this agenda, you may address the Commission at this time.
So to comment again for something that is not on the agenda, if you are phoning in, please press *9. Else use the raise the hand icon at the bottom of the screen. And no one wishes to speak.
Yeah, it doesn't look like we have anybody here. We'll go ahead and move to the consent calendar, which has one item, the minutes from March 29th, 2022, San Rafael Planning Commission meeting. Would anyone like to make a motion to approve the minutes?
Let's see if there's anyone. We actually have 4 attendees, so let me check if anyone in attendance wants to speak on the minutes. If you do want to speak on the minutes, please use the raise the hand icon at the bottom of the screen, or *9 if you're phoning in.
And just for the record, it was Planning Commission from May 24th.
Okay.
Thank you. And no one wishes to speak on the minutes.
Mm-hmm.
This is Commissioner Haveman. If appropriate, I'll move to accept the minutes. Approve the minutes.
Would anyone like to second that motion?
Commissioner Schock, I'll second it.
Okay. Okay, Chair, I think we'll go ahead and ask for a roll call then, Leslie.
Okay, great. The vote on the minutes, consent calendar. Commissioner Harris.
Yes.
Commissioner Haveman.
Yes.
Commissioner Mercado is absent. Commissioner Samuzzi is absent. Commissioner Schock.
Yes.
And Vice Chair Saudi.
I'll recuse myself since I was not at the meeting.
May I ask, you may.
Okay.
You may also vote on it. And if you do vote, we will have a quorum.
Okay, I will vote yes, then. I will vote yes. I can read them, yeah.
Okay, good. Okay. Thank you.
Okay, great.
Minutes passed.
Minutes passed. So we can now move to the first agenda item that we have today. It's 55 Brookdale Avenue. The item is to construct 10 dwelling units within 3 detached structures on 2 vacant lots. They're in a high density residential zone, and the property owners are Mike Falk and Stephen Crutchfield. Cecilia is our contract planner for this project. And I think we can, Leslie, do you want to go ahead and introduce the project?
Yes. So this next item is the first project to take advantage of the 1-year pilot program for streamlined design review that was passed by City Council on April 18th. As such, I wish to reiterate the procedures that staff and the applicant will provide reports, followed by time for clarifying questions by both the planning commissioners and the design board representatives. This will be followed by public comment as usual. And then after public comment is closed, the design review board members will first be allowed discussion. And after recommendation, it will be turned over to the commission for your discussion and review, taking into account the design review recommendations. And now I would like to take a roll call of our design review representatives. And since you both, you may not all know them, we have with us tonight Jeff Kent, who is the well, I have to officially do the roll call, but Jeff Kent is a landscape architect on DRB, and Sarah Reggie is the chair. With that, board member Kent.
Present.
And Chair Reggie.
Present.
Thank you for joining us tonight.
Thank you.
And I would also like to introduce Cecilia Jaroslawski, one of our newer contract planners, and she is the project manager for 55 Brookdale. So I'm going to turn it over to Cecilia.
Thank you, Leslie, and good evening, commissioners and design board representatives. With your permission, I would like to share my screen. Can everyone see that?
Yes.
Yeah, we can see it.
Great. Before you, you have a project located at 55 Brookdale Avenue. The project requires the review and approval of an environmental design review permit and a lot line adjustment to merge two non-complying lots. The project includes the merger of the two vacant lots. Each lot is 45 feet wide by 126 feet deep to create one code-complying lot. And the construction of 3 structures to contain a total of 10 residential units, including 1 below market rate unit, on-site courtyard area, parking, and associated residential storage area. The project is located approximately 200 feet west of Highway 101 and are through lots with frontage on Brookdale and Lincoln Avenues to the west. The site contains an upward slope from east to west and are the only remaining vacant through lots on the block. The site contains an underground culvert running from the center of the south property line along the eastern portion of the property to the northeast corner of the site and is approximately 3 feet below grade. Across Brookdale Avenue is US 101 and the SMART train tracks. Building 1 would contain 3,494 square feet, include 3 residential units and be 2 levels and front along Brookdale Avenue. Building 2 would contain 3,925 square feet and include 4 residential units. Building 3 would contain 3,548 square feet and include 3 residential units. Buildings 2 and 3 would contain 3 levels. 1 residential unit would be a below market rate unit. The main entrance would be from Lincoln Avenue, while parking would be at the rear along Brookdale Avenue. The project includes 17 on-site parking spaces, 6 of which would be tandem and 10 would be car lifts. 8 storage lockers would be located between the courtyard and the parking area. Mentioned in the previous slide, Building 1 would include 3 residential units. Building 2 would include 4 residential units, and Building 3 would contain 3 units. Both Buildings 2 and 3 would be 3 levels. All units would contain 2 bedrooms, except for 1 unit located within Building 2, which would contain a 1-bedroom unit. 1 residential unit would be low-income, below-market rate unit, the location of which has yet to be determined. Conditions of approval, I believe number 25 and 26 address this in the packet. Building 1 would front along Brookdale Avenue, and buildings 2 and 3 would front along Lincoln Avenue, containing the main pedestrian entryway. Building 1 along Brookdale Avenue would be 2 levels with a ridged roof line for a more traditional architectural style. Buildings 2 and 3 along Lincoln Avenue would contain 3 levels and be more modern in design with a flat roof. Although buildings 2 and 3 have 3 levels, only 2 of the levels would be visible from Lincoln Avenue. The project height along Brookdale Avenue frontage would be 25 feet, and due to the upward slope of the lot would be 21 feet tall along the Lincoln Avenue frontage. The project would not exceed the maximum allowable height of 36 feet. The project includes a variety of landscaped areas surrounding the structures using drought-tolerant material. A centrally located 700 square foot courtyard open space is proposed to include several patio areas and an exercise area. Alongside the courtyard area would be 8 storage lockers, 4 foot wide by 8 feet deep, and a bicycle maintenance area with shower head for bike cleaning. This slide demonstrates the project from Lincoln Avenue looking north and south. These 2 buildings are 3 levels. Materials include stucco and ribbed corrugated metal. The applicant has asked that an additional YouTube informational video was sent to the commission, which I believe was sent to you earlier, for more detailed information on the project materials. These renderings show the project from Brookdale Avenue facing on-site parking, including the tandem parking area, which would include a landscaped trellis to mitigate a parking lot appearance. The project complies with the applicable general plan policies, and based on the commitment to provide one below market rate unit, the project qualifies as a density bonus project, allowing for up to 2 concessions and unlimited waivers of development standards. Per Government Code Section 65915E, the applicant is requesting waivers to allow encroachment into setback areas, parking within the rear yard setback, and reduced on-site landscaping from 50 to 40%, and is requesting 1 concession to allow on-site tandem parking. With the approval of the density bonus requests, the project would be consistent with the zoning district. Staff recommends the Planning Commission and Design Review representatives adopt the resolution approving the environmental and design review application and lot line adjustment with conditions of approval. Alternatively, this body may approve the applications with modifications to the plans, continue the hearing to allow the applicant to address any comments or concerns raised, or deny the project. Thank you, Commissioners. That concludes my presentation. I'm available for questions. I believe the applicant is also in attendance.
Thank you, Cecilia. Would the applicant like to go ahead and speak to the project at this time?
Sure. My name is...
Are you able to start your video?
There we go.
Yeah, there you are.
My name is Michael Folk. I am a co-owner with Steve Crutchfield on this project. I figured I'd, by the way, Cecilia, great job with the animation and presenting that project. I think you've done yourself when it comes to Zoom meetings. I think that's a really, fair representation of the project, but I think I'd like to give you a little more context to sort of how this came to be and why it hasn't been developed. So that project site, those two lots, originally there was a duplex there that burnt down in the 1960s. It was purchased by the people that we bought it from in the early 70s, late 60s or early 70s. And it hasn't been developed since then. And it was purchased by a developer. So they developed other properties in the area. And the big reason why that property wasn't developed was because there's a culvert that runs diagonally through the property, as Cecilia showed her, I think it was the second or third slide. And that's really important to understand both why it wasn't developed and also to understand why we developed it the way we did. So if you're thinking about that project site, and we divided the project into 3 buildings, we couldn't move any of the buildings or have any permanent structures over the culvert, which then makes it very challenging to build. And so that's why we broke up the massing the way we did. And I think actually it achieved some really credible aims, in so much as Brookdale is primarily made up of single family and small multifamily. As a matter of fact, 41 Brookdale, right next door to us, has a duplex and a duplex in the rear, and I think a triplex in the front. And so that's what we were trying to mirror there. On the Lincoln side, it's that same duplex, and on the northern side, it's a small commercial building and then a 4-unit building after that. So that's what we were going for, to sort of keep the rhythm of the neighborhood with that small multi-family feel. Because the lot is primarily flat with a steep upgrade, at Lincoln, it seemed to make perfect sense to basically bury a floor so that we would just present 2 floors on Lincoln. And so I think we've done that fairly successfully, and we match the properties on both sides as far as a 2-story building. The building to the north has a 5-foot setback, and the building to the south has a 10-foot setback. So our goal of a 5-foot setback, though, is an encroachment by code standard, is consistent with what else is there already. And if you think about that portion of Lincoln, our goal as a developer is to make sure that you're not walking down that street and having this experience of broken teeth, where you've got something that's developed and something that's not, and some weird setbacks. So we did something that was consistent on the Lincoln side. On the Brookdale side, we have a series of garages and driveways, and we've utilized our property the same way. This project did go to the DRB Subcommittee in January of 21. It was substantially what you see here. The DRB's comments were, could you please, primarily were, please flesh out the common area and sort of what the amenities will be there. And we've spent a lot of time doing that. And if you have questions, specific questions about how we did it or what we were trying to do, happy to answer those. But that's why the buildings are arranged the way they are. That's why they mimic the neighboring properties. And that's why it's detailed the way it is now. One of the questions that I had asked the DRB subcommittee at that point was, we can do 9 units very easily. And we have basically 9 separately accessible tandem spots or lift spots from Brookdale. We can do a 10th unit. And zoning allows us with our 11,000 and some odd foot property to do 11 units. But I asked the DRB, would you prefer that we keep it at 9 and do 9 2-bedroom units, or would you like to see us add a 1-bedroom unit that won't have parking? And the DRB direction at that point was, we'd like to see more units, or an additional unit, I should say. And so that's why we pursued that direction. As far as the architecture, you can see that on the Brookdale side, we did gabled roofs and something that reads more traditional, like most of Brookdale is. And on the Lincoln side, we did something that was more contemporary, in keeping with the properties directly across the street on Lincoln and some of the other more modern properties on Lincoln. Lastly, we have been looking for effective ways to do responsible building. In this case, I think a fairly quick build. We're utilizing a company called Be Public, and they do prefabricated panelized building panels that we will use to create the shells there on the site. They have considerable advantages. They are 12 inches thick. They are pre-insulated. They basically are made for passive buildings. And if you don't know anything about passive building, simply understand that they are much more energy efficient than conventional building. In this case, I think they should add to the sound deadening, which is not an insignificant consideration when you're right next to the freeway and the railway. But it's the one reason we ended up pushing out to 4 foot setbacks on the side instead of 5 foot setbacks on the side, because of the additional mass for that building construction type. As commissioners, as a city, you should care how developers are building their buildings and that they are using green technology. And I think this, I know this is the first in Marin, probably not in the Bay Area, but I think it's not only better for us as developers, but it's better for the neighborhood because we can build more quickly and thus have a shorter construction window. It's good for the residents because it is so energy efficient, makes for healthier housing. And I'm not sure that you all got the video. I hope it was sent out. If you have more questions about that, you can certainly ask. I'm happy to entertain that. But I think it's an important consideration when you think about what kind of projects are being built in San Rafael and how they're being built. And so, if you have specific questions about specific details of this plan, I'm happy to answer those. But I wanted to give you a general feeling for how this project came to be, why it is the way it is, and why it's really important that it's built this way and there aren't really any other options. And I should actually, we are only required to have 15 parking spaces. We currently have 18, though there's a question whether you can park behind an ADA spot. In our case, that second spot behind the ADA spot is dedicated to the same unit that has the ADA spot. So we have 18. I think we're recognized for 17. We only need 15. but to give you some context there, the neighborhood, and as I walked around the neighborhood to understand what the neighbors' concerns were, it wasn't so much the housing, it was parking, parking, parking. And it turns out that a lot of the apartments up on Lincoln park down on Brookdale because it's convenient to park down on Brookdale. And it's impacted the residents on Brookdale significantly. So there wasn't really an option for us to come with a project, at least if we were responding to what the neighbors' concerns were. There wasn't really an option for us to come forward with less parking. And so we've come forward with something that I think really addresses neighbor concerns and provides our own residents then with parking options. So every 2-bedroom apartment has 2 parking spaces. As I mentioned before, we have a 1-bedroom with no parking spaces. But if you look at the plan, our goal was really not to provide a residential development that incented people to get into their cars first, but to provide a residential development that encouraged people to walk, take their bikes. And in so much as we've done that, we've created sort of these bike garages that everyone has. They're separately secured so that if someone's got a bike or an e-bike or whatever, that's sort of their first way to get out of the property. And as you may know, the multi-use bike path is just on the other side of the railway, so very close by. Again, gives you some context to why we chose the things we did for this project. And I think that's about all I have to say. Again, I'm happy to entertain questions, but I think that gives you enough context for why it was designed the way it was designed.
Thank you, Michael. That was a good, thoughtful explanation, some background on the project. Does anybody have any questions for the staff or the applicant at this point? Hey, Jeff, go ahead. You're first.
I have a bunch of them, actually. Maybe I'm losing my mind, but was there a proposal for a park between Brookdale and the railroad tracks? Did you show that to us?
I did not.
A year ago?
I'm sorry, are you addressing me?
Yes, all these questions will be for the applicant.
Okay, great.
Sorry.
No, we never, so when in 2008, the freeway was expanded and there was eminent domain used to clear the housing on the east side of Brookdale, that property was then taken over by Caltrans. So, and Leslie, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but it's my understanding that Caltrans basically controls that property. And they have said that unless it's a park or for some civic use, there is no plan to do any development on that property. I certainly, as a developer, don't control that in any way, never offered to provide a park. And I guess there was some funding from Caltrans that basically cleared the weeds there some years back and put in some limited amounts of trees. But it is what it is right now. I think, and if I can editorialize just a little bit, I think the thing that the neighborhood needs the most is parking. So a park is not necessarily, I think, something that the residents on Brookdale would want, but I can't speak for them. But parking is certainly something would be important.
Okay, thanks. Yeah, I was mostly testing my memory and it didn't go very well. So the areas on the site, I know your landscape architect is in here, the areas where you have carex planted, are they bioretention areas? Do you have bioretention on the site?
We do have bioretention. We have it on both sides, north and south of buildings 2 and 3. We do have a bioretention basin at the in the courtyard area. And then, of course, we are directly over the drainage culvert through that courtyard. So that's where our overflow goes.
So are they being run to daylight someplace on that site?
I think there is some, I think there's a run out to Brookdale, but my understanding from Public Works was that we had the option of inputting directly into the culvert right below us.
Okay, yeah, that sounds good. Did you explore maybe adding a little bit more permeable paving to the project to reduce the amount of bioretention?
That's a really good question for the civil engineer. I'm fairly certain we did investigate making a lot of non-permeable, making a lot of permeable. So, we don't have grouted joints, everything's pavers, sand set, that kind of thing. So, yeah, I mean, that site, save for the buildings that are on it, is primarily meant to drain.
Okay. Yeah, it would seem that the surface parking on the south side might be an opportunity for that.
I would agree with you. I think we have investigated that permeable asphalt for that side.
Okay, yeah, that'd probably be a good idea. And then, so you're not allowed to put buildings over the culvert, but you're able to put storage and your lift units and planting, is that correct?
That is correct.
And then, do you know offhand what the height of the screen is that's screening your parking lift? Is that like 14 feet or something like that?
No, it's probably closer to 12. So, if you were looking at a picture of that and the renders of that, you can see we've really made it something more akin to like a garage door as far as the opening on the bottom, and then having that green screen above it. So yeah, about 12 is where we max out.
Okay, is the green screen only on the north side of it? Because
it's on the north, south, and east sides.
Okay.
Yeah, because we've got fence behind, so.
All right, yeah, it was hard to tell whether or not there were trees that were showing through from the backside or
right.
The screen was on all sides. So is the idea that it'll be planted on 3 sides? And I mean, it's not real clear how it's going to be screened. I know you have one vine listed in your planting pellet, but it doesn't.
Yeah, so we've actually done something similar on a different project where we get full camouflage from day one. So we have artificial vines that we can put up there while the real vines grow in. And so, basically it'll look like a fully leafed out, if you imagine, I don't know if you know what hog panel is. So it's hog panel with vines pushing through it. And so it will, this is not some kind of, we hope that someday it'll look like this render. We know from day one it'll look like that render.
Okay. I'm still sort of curious about how that parking lift's going to work. For example, if my car is on the top and there's a car underneath me, does that car have to be moved for me to get out?
So as I mentioned, we have 10 units, 9 of which have their own parking. So each unit that has its own parking is a 2-bedroom, and they have 2 parking spaces. So each one of those lifts is for 1 unit. So you're not necessarily moving someone else's car, you're moving one of your own cars.
Got it. Okay, yeah, that makes a lot more sense.
Yeah, and the same is true with the tandem spaces.
Right. So my final question is how are you dealing with trash cans?
We have enclosures there in several places on the property, but on the Brookdale side, we have trash cans. Basically, as you sort of bisect the parking and go by that ADA space, once you go in the gate, there's a series of enclosures that handle the trash, and then we have some enclosures farther in the middle of the property that handle trash as well. So they're rolled out to the street. We're not expecting to have a dumpster size trash container. It'll all be the standard 96 gallon trash containers on wheels.
So those are the smaller structures that are kind of perpendicular to the storage units and parallel to the parking.
Exactly.
Great. I'm done.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thanks, Jeff. Anyone else? Hi, Sarah. You want to go ahead and ask your questions?
Sure. I think these are also for the applicant. I did watch the Be Public video that you sent around, and one question on that, because of the difference in building 1 from the other 2 buildings, is it correct that all 3 of the buildings will use that same system?
Yes.
Okay. And then my second question is on the EV charging for the project, and this might be to Cecilia, is that a requirement and how's that being handled? Or maybe to the applicant, I'm not sure.
Okay, well, I'll answer it then. So, we have firm belief that that EV charging will be ubiquitous. So it's not our expectation to do a charging station or even 2 charging stations. Every one of those spots will have capacity to get to charging from this spot. And Leslie, you can fill in here what the standard is or what the requirement is, but that certainly exceeds the requirement for EV charging on a property, on a multifamily property.
So every parking spot is EV charge ready. Is that correct?
You can reach a cable for EV charging at every parking spot.
Okay. I'm sorry, Leslie, did you want to comment?
I do not know that what the requirement is for residential, so I will look into that and report back next meeting.
Okay, and then my third question is about the the color scheme is very sophisticated with the white and gray and dark gray, and then the yellow is pretty high contrast. So I just wanted to hear a little bit about the inspiration for where that color came from and what you're contextually looking at for that.
Sure. So, I mean, if you think about because that color it shows up primarily on Lincoln. So, Lincoln being a major thoroughfare ends up being a fast street and doesn't necessarily lend itself to residential, though there clearly is residential on that street. We wanted to have a sense of entry and presence on that street. And so, you didn't, when you go there, you'll see this, there's clearly a portal to come into this property. And if you think about the property, it's all inward facing, right? The buildings sort of look in on this central courtyard, and you've got this muse feel once you get in it, which is important because you're bordered by Lincoln on the one side, which is high traffic. You've got 101 and the train on the other side, and Brookdale's low key, but and then you've got just natural noise that occurs between those two arterials. So it tends to be a very inward-facing property by design. But we wanted to give some celebration to the entrance, and that sort of chartreusey green really points out, hey, this is a residential thing. This is something, there's something special back here, and there is something special back there. This is not just entrance into a bunch of parking spaces. This is a sort of celebrated core in the middle of this small residential 10-unit community. So in that sense, we wanted to give it high visibility and signature, especially from the Brookdale side. And also, like I said before, we want, from the Lincoln side, we want Lincoln to feel residential. And, there are residences there, but especially the Brookdale properties that go through, they tend to turn their back on Lincoln a bit. And we wanted to sort of give it more presence and oomph to show that, yes, this is residential and, there are people here that live here and that kind of thing.
Okay, thank you.
Sure.
Anybody else have any questions for staff or for the applicant?
I guess I do have a question for staff. We're being asked to give 3 exceptions, and I'm wondering if staff has any guidance for us on that. The 5 feet in front instead of 15, and the sides 4 feet instead of 5. Is there anything that staff would like to say about that?
Commissioner, did you have a specific concern in mind?
I don't have a specific concern other than it's deviating from the standards.
It is deviating from the standards somewhat, but pursuant to the density bonus law, it is permitted, and in light of that, the applicant is not requesting the maximum allowable for exceptions or concessions.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that would be my only comment, and I would defer to Leslie if there's anything that I'm missing as well.
Yeah, so I'll just follow up on that. So they are waivers under density bonus law. So waivers must be accommodated in order to allow the affordable housing project. Okay. So you are essentially required to accept the waivers as part of the affordable housing. Okay. Cecilia, I just wanted to mention one, I know this is questions, one bit of errata. Did you want to mention in the staff report?
I did. Thank you, Leslie. Yes. In the staff
Okay.
report, it mentions that the applicant is going to be providing a very low income below market rate unit, when in reality, it will just be a lower income below market rate unit. And that still would comply with the density bonus law requirement.
Okay, then I just have one question about the 5 feet instead of 15-foot setback. I think you mentioned that that's consistent with what's neighboring it. I apologize, I didn't have a chance to tour the site before tonight.
Yeah, so the building to the north, which had been residential, which is now an office and part residential, that building has a 5-foot setback. And the building to our south, which is the duplex, the backside of 41 Brookdale, that has a 10-foot setback with a 6-foot fence in front of it. And then if you go farther to the north, right at the corner of Brookdale and Lincoln, there's a 4-unit building there, again, that reads very much like it's right up on the street with a 5-foot setback. So in that sense, I think we're really consistent. And if we're trying to create something, on the block that reads residential over and over and over, this repeating pattern, I think it's important to have that 5-foot setback there.
Yeah, and the fence to the south it looked from the renderings to be 5-foot setback approximately.
That's right.
Yeah. Okay. Great.
And just one last thing on your earlier question about concessions and waivers. So it is an unlimited number of waivers that can be requested for a project like this, provided it's affordable, which it is. So, we're not trying to get like the most we can get here. As you can see, we've kept it under the height standards. Our requests for setbacks are fairly modest, 4 feet instead of 5 feet. The front, as I said, it's a repeating pattern, so that makes sense within the context of the community. And then the parking, that's really our other issue. We've got parking it's all about definitions here. What side is the front side, right? I mean, there are houses up front on Brookdale and there are houses up front on Lincoln. So we have 2 fronts or 2 backs, or then you choose which one you want. Is it a front or a back? So, we called it a back on Brookside, but we've also tried to make it feel like, it's consistent with the neighbors there too. So that's why we've done the parking the way we've done it.
Yeah, I have no problem with that.
Okay.
Great. Anyone? Last couple questions. Anyone else have anything? Oh, Kelly, would you like to go ahead and ask a question?
Hi. Yeah. Thank you. I just had a question about drainage with the culvert, being that the buildings are, as you said, Michael, built, around the culvert. Is there any risk of negative impact to drainage, or has that? I assume that's all been addressed, but
Sure.
I don't quite understand that whole part of the project.
Yeah. So I'm going to give you a little historical context, and I'm not going to draw this out, but I think it's important to understand sort of how it came to be. The culvert, the original culvert, which actually slips under Brookdale, was built in 1925. And so this precedes the highway, and this basically ends up being the main drainage culvert for both the Dominican side and the Lincoln side. That's where all the water came down in that culvert. Eventually, the freeway was built in the 50s, and the flow that came down the original culvert was significantly less than what it was built for. So if you were to enter the culvert right under Brookdale, it's 6.5 feet tall. It's like walking through a World War II tunnel. It's huge. And so the culvert on our property was then, it was an open stream at one point. It was closed up probably about the same time the freeway was built. And so the first thing we did when we bought the property was do an analysis of the culvert. Basically, would we have to replace it? What would we have to repair it? What was the status of the culvert? And there's an engineering report in the pack that you got, but basically it says, yep, it's in remarkably good shape. It's been around here for, however many decades, and it looks very serviceable. There isn't any decay. It is well fortified. They use steel, and they actually they x-rayed the walls and figured out exactly how much load it could take, because we were talking about putting parking lifts on top of it and that kind of thing.
Right.
So that is a overcapacity culvert. That is a culvert that has so much capacity that really isn't used anymore. So if we input a little bit of water, it's really, it's inconsequential given the size of that culvert. And there's just not enough water coming down from farther upstream, because there are so many other ways the water can get down that really it couldn't get down that way, when this was first built.
Okay, understood. Thank you for the clarification there.
Anybody else? If there are no more questions, we'll go ahead and close the public hearing. And I'll ask staff to
open it.
Go ahead.
Yeah, we're going to open the public hearing.
Yeah, or sorry, to open the public hearing. I'll ask staff to go ahead and open it to public comment.
Yes, thank you. If you'd like to speak on this item, please use the raise the hand icon at the bottom of the screen. Or if you're dialing in, please press *9. And we have a speaker, Amy Lykover. Amy, you will have 3 minutes.
Hi, hello, Leslie. Thank you so much. This is really not a comment on the project per se. I simply wanted to mention, as far as the format, some of you may know that I'm the president of the Federation of San Rafael Neighborhoods. As far as the format, I'm a little bit concerned, this being a public meeting, right, that I cannot see who's attending. There's no participants window in this webinar. There's no way of me knowing how many people are here. And so this is of concern. I think residents really would like to know who's at a meeting, would like to know who's, if you're not speaking, who you are and representing what interest. I'm very happy listening to the experts. I think you've done a great job, but it's almost as if we are in like a black box without any access. And I know, Leslie, particularly, that you're very concerned about public access. So please take note that this is not public access. Okay, I can ask a question. You'll never see me, but that's not the same thing as being in a public meeting.
Thank you, Amy. And I will follow up with the City Clerk about the procedures for that.
Thank you very much.
Is there anyone else in the attendance? And there are 5 attendees, by the way. They all name themselves. So if anyone else wishes to speak, please use the raise the hand icon or *9 if you are phoning in. And give it a few more seconds. Use the hand icon or *9. And no one else wishes to speak.
Okay. We'll go ahead and close the public hearing. At this time, I'd like to call on Design Review Board representatives in turn to ask follow-up questions of the staff. I'll first ask Board Member Kent to go ahead and ask any follow-up questions.
I have none.
What's that, Jeff?
I have no follow-up
Okay,
questions.
not much. Okay. Chair Ridge, do you have any follow-up questions?
No additional questions. Thank you.
Okay. Then I'll go ahead and turn it over to our DRB representatives for discussion and deliberation.
I'll go ahead and start.
Okay.
So I was on the subcommittee that saw this. I guess now it's been about a year and a half, and in my memory, which we've already established isn't all that good, is that we liked the project. We thought it was going in the right direction. We did encourage you for the 10th to put in the 10th unit, and I'm sure we were very intrigued by your parking solution at the time. I think it's a tough site, and I actually think this is a rather good solution. I like the architecture. I like the two different styles. It kind of visually breaks the project into two, and I think that's positive. I think the site is amazingly well organized, given all your constraints. I thought the overall success of the project still depended on your parking solution, and I'm pretty satisfied with that the explanation that you gave us that this is a viable solution and should work out just fine. I think the plant palette is interesting. I think the planting is well organized and logical. I can support the 10% reduction, and since it is so good, I can easily support the 10% reduction in landscaping. I can also support the reductions in the setbacks. Couple of small things is one, I would encourage you to, if you can use the permeable asphalt in the surface parking and reduce some of the bioswales, because bioswale landscaping is never as interesting as conventional landscaping. And just make sure that any trees that you put in your bioswales are recommended for that use. Bioswales are real sandy soils, and trees have a tendency to fall over. So I didn't check yours against the list, but I know the list is pretty small. The other small recommendation I would make is on the south side by your surface parking, about halfway through the westernmost tandem parking, you eliminate the fence. I would encourage you to put a 3-foot fence and extend it closer to Brookdale, 3 feet, so you don't have visibility issues, but it also give you a little bit of a screening for your parking from the neighbor. And that's all I got. Nice job.
Thank you. We'll move on to Chair Reg for her discussion. Thoughts?
Sure. So I agree with Jeff. I think I did not have the opportunity to see the project previously, but I think it's a thoughtful use of the project site, separating the program into 3 buildings, regardless of the culvert, gives a nice identity to the different types of units. I think the introduction of the B public kind of construction methodology is really interesting. I appreciate that kind of passive house standard. For a residential level, I agree that the acoustics are going to be, difficult on this site. So I think that's a really nice addition. I also appreciate that the project is not exceeding the, maximum height, and it's being, I feel respectful to the neighborhood in that way. I was happy to hear about the EV charging. I agree with Jeff's comments on the overall parking. I think there is some fine tuning that needs to be done, but it seems like there's been significant consideration to how the units function and the parking provided. And then I am a real big fan of the yellow color. I feel like in a, pretty sophisticated palette, it does give that kind of, entry feature. And I couldn't quite tell if, because on the renderings, it was shown a little bit differently than in the elevations, but I'm hopeful that that yellow color continues to the entries on building 1, which will most likely not come through that kind of Grand Lincoln moment with the yellow color. They'll come from the parking direct into their units. So I was happy to see that kind of included on a smaller scale at their door entries that are inward facing. I think that's a really nice reference for the project and pulls those 2 very different building types, but very cohesive with the color palette into one nice development. So other than that, I did not have any further comments. Great project.
Thank you. So Leslie, since this is the first time I've done this, we've heard from both board members and the chair, or both the board member and the chair. And I guess we have to go ahead and, basically summarize their recommendations to the Planning Commission so we can go ahead and start discussing the agenda item. So should we just make consensus of that? I guess we would go ahead and just list the items that board member Kent had noted in terms of the fence, and then I may have lost track of the other ones.
Yeah, so I think that would be a discussion between Chair Reggie and board member Kent. It sounds like it's a recommendation for approval, but I'll let you all both make that. And then there were some points that board member Kent addressed, which was to encourage more permeable parking and reduce the bioswales. And again, that could be a recommendation, like literally, or a recommendation of a suggested condition, which then, if they agreed to that, you guys can consider as the PC. The other one was to extend, I need to help me here, Jeff, to extend the the south side fence by the surface parking at a 3-foot level closer to Brookdale, so that it wouldn't impede kind of sightline distance, but would still provide a level of screening. Do I have that correct?
Right, and that's because the parking goes right up to the property line, so it's not logical to put any plantings in there. So about the only solution that's left is a fence, and obviously you can't put a 6-foot fence in there, or you would impede traffic. So, as far as the permeable paving, that's a suggestion. If the applicant wants to pursue that, that's the applicant's choice.
So I guess we'll turn it to Drb Chair Reggie about the offense, if that's something that you agree with and would like to add as part of your recommendation to PC.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree with the fence. It's more like an offense extension.
So with that, and correct me if I'm wrong, it sounds like we have a DRB representative's recommendation for approval with the additional inclusion of fencing along the south side, surface parking closer to Brookdale at a 3-foot height. Foot height limit.
Sounds good to me.
Great.
Excellent.
Thank you for the assistance, Leslie.
Yeah, thank you. It's new to all of us.
Yeah, it's a whole new process. I just want to make sure we were doing it right. So at this point, I'll go ahead and call on the commissioners to ask follow-up questions for staff. So if we can go ahead and go to them. It looks like the applicant, you have your hand raised, but at this point, I don't believe we're not opening it back up to the applicant because we have closed the public hearing. So we'll go ahead and continue with.
I'm sorry, I'm just asking a clarifying question on the 3-foot fence.
Okay. Yeah, okay, go ahead.
So how far out does the 3-foot fence come? Is it out to the property line? Is it how far back? Does it contain all the parking? Just need to understand that.
My recommendation would be to extend the fence towards Brookdale and again, to help visibility when people are pulling out, I would probably stop the fence about 3 or 4 feet from the street.
Okay.
Okay, great. We'll go ahead and open this back up to the Planning Commission to see if they have any questions of staff or of the applicant.
Commissioner Harris, a question. And I went on the public site and saw that they have completed projects in as little as 5 days. And I was just wondering if there was some idea of how long this project might take.
Yeah, no, it's pretty remarkable. So we would expect that in a normal project, you would do the foundation, and obviously we'll do the same thing here. And then you would have your framing crews come out, and they could spend, 2 to 3 months doing framing and basically enclosing the envelope of the project. In this case, we are expecting that we probably will take maybe 2 weeks once the foundations are in and the panels start arriving to assemble. And I think that's on the longer end for us to make sealable envelopes. A little more time to get windows in, but now we're talking about windows, building wrap, and being weatherproof within a couple weeks, maybe 3 by the time you get windows in. So, we're probably short-circuiting that portion of the construction by 2 months. And then all the other stuff happens like it normally would. The trades still come in and do plumbing and electrical and the siding and all that. So that doesn't shorten that part. But as far as the what you would typically expect from framing and roofing, that goes much quicker. And of course, those panels come pre-insulated and pre-building wrapped. So that takes out that step as well.
I do have a question, Commissioner Haveman. Don't get me wrong. I think the construction style and what you're doing is terrific. I just wondered from the video that I watched earlier, there was a crane on site all the while the building was being put together. Can you talk about how that would work, given the limited space on Brookdale?
Well, actually works pretty well because we'll work on the 2 buildings on Lincoln first. So we have an entire flat site to work with. And then if you think about all the parking there and the 700-foot, common area, we've got plenty of room to stick a crane in there. That won't be a problem at all. We may end up looking, it depends kind of how the arrival of the panels happens. Is it possible that we could stage some on the other side of Brookdale while the crane is working to put them in place? Possibly, but our expectation is that we will time the trucks to bring them sort of right on time. So they arrive and, within a day or 2, they're being assembled. And then we can, once the Lincoln side buildings are done, then you can kind of back everything off and you're just working on those lower buildings on Brookdale. So I don't see where there's it's a good size. It's 90 feet wide. It has a fair amount of space to work around it. And because you have no buildings across the street on Brookdale, I mean, it's sort of the ideal situation as far as building something like this on an infill site.
And the crane on top of the culvert is okay?
We can steel panel over the culvert. So we can basically bridge that and take the load off the culvert.
I don't have any other questions, but I do want to applaud the project. I think it's terrific, very thoughtful, intentional, clever, and innovative. I like it a lot.
Thank you.
Particularly the bike storage and facilities.
I am a big proponent myself.
Excellent.
And Commissioner Schalk?
Oh, I was just raising my hand that just to echo what John was saying. Yeah, I just think it's incredibly innovative and I love it. So that's all. I don't have any questions. All the questions have already been asked.
Does anyone have any questions? We'll wait a couple seconds. Okay. So we'll go ahead and ask staff whether they have any comments or advice at this point.
Commissioner, I don't have any additional comments.
Great. So if we don't have any additional comments, can we get a motion started to recommend approval? And this would be to the City Council.
Chair Saudi, may I ask, I believe Leslie was going to provide a recommendation on how to create that recommended
Okay.
condition of approval from.
Yeah, I was going to wait for the motion to have a motion on, but since Director Giudice brought it up, I would recommend that the motion made consider, as recommended by staff, the condition to include the change in condition number 25, that the below market rate unit is low income and not very low income. In addition, to craft, to include a condition as recommended by our DRB representative. And I have written that the fence along the south side property line shall be continued at a 3-foot height towards Brookdale and shall stop subject to review and approval of the traffic engineer approximately 3 feet from the street. The plan set submitted for building permit shall include this fence. That is my recommended condition.
As Commissioner Haveman, I'm happy to move that we accept the project with those additional conditions. Is that sufficient, Leslie?
Beautiful.
Thank you.
Much easier than repeating all of them. Would anyone like to second that motion?
Commissioner Schock, I'd like to second that.
Great. So I guess we can go ahead and move to a roll call, unless we have any discussion before that. Okay, looks like we're moving to roll call.
Great. Commissioner Harris.
Yes.
Commissioner Hayden.
Yes.
Commissioner Mercado is absent. Commissioner Smooth is absent. Commissioner Schock.
Yes.
And Vice Chair Saudi.
Yes.
Motion passes.
Great. Thank you so much. Thank you, Cecilia, and the applicants. Really great project. Rolls really well into our next agenda item, which is the Affirmatively Furthering Fair Housing presentation. And we'll go ahead and I'll pass that to Leslie.
Yeah, thank you. I would like to introduce Lynn Darby. We are all very excited to have her here tonight and as part of our city team. Liz has joined the city as a consultant in the city manager's office. She will be assisting the city manager's office with community engagement and equity work, and will also be supporting the community development department on the housing element, outreach and policy development, and other housing related policy work. So again, I'm super excited to have you here and to thank you for your time and presenting tonight.
Thank you, Leslie, and thank you, everybody. I know it's been a long evening, and just in case you didn't know, the county right now, which is where I formerly did my housing on the work, is actually going through their final draft. So that's all ahead of you. But before we do that, I would like to ask for permission to share my screen. If I can do so, Leslie, that's doable. I always get nervous at this point because I'm afraid something's going to come.
Yeah, no, you could. On my screen, it looks like a big green share screen button at the bottom.
Did that work?
No. Oh, there we go.
There we go.
Okay, great. Okay. Then let me just start my presentation, and I promise not to make it too long because I promise that's the last one. Okay, so again, my name is Liz Darby, and so I'll be presenting on the Affirmatively Furthering Fair Housing requirement. That's part of the housing element. I think most of you here have heard about the AFFH work. I want to give an overview, and if you've heard me speak before, this time I'm going to try to make it a little bit more specific to the San Rafael. So tonight I'll begin with a quick overview of the requirements for Affirmatively Furthering Fair Housing, followed by an update of our community engagement work that we're doing here in the city. I'll provide several slides showing the type of data and mapping we need to do the analysis for AFFH, followed by an overview on how the data needs to help us inform our upcoming housing sites, our programs, policies, and our actions. Affirmatively furthering fair housing, or AFFH, means we must, as a city in our housing element, identify sites and develop policies and programs that address significant disparities in housing needs and in access to opportunities, that replace segregated living patterns with truly integrated and balanced living patterns, those that transform racially and ethnically concentrated areas of poverty into areas of opportunity, and that foster and maintain compliance with our civil rights and fair housing laws. California's Housing and Community Development, or HCD, guidelines mandate that local governments identify meaningful goals to address the impacts of systemic issues such as residential segregation, housing cost burdens, and unequal education or employment opportunities to determine whether or not these issues create or perpetuate discrimination against protected classes. So basically, AB 686 requires us to lead with a community outreach and engagement effort to conduct an assessment of our fair housing policies and practices, to perform an analysis of our sites at housing at all income levels, to identify communities of high resources and low resources, and to create concrete and specific actions that affirmatively further fair housing. The housing element must consider the elements and factors that cause, increase, contribute to, or maintain, or perpetuate segregation, or any racially and ethnically concentrated areas of poverty, those that have significant disparities in access to opportunities and disproportionate housing needs. So the analysis must address patterns both locally and regionally, and look at our trends over time, and look at that data in a few minutes. The community engagement efforts that we have as part of the fair housing effort needs to be used as we conduct and analyze our sites. It should include identifying housing opportunities for low-income individuals and families that are near high-quality schools, employment opportunities, and public transportation. Meaningful goals that take into consideration the results of our community engagement efforts and our assessment of fair housing should inform our site selections and should be reflected in all of the priorities, goals, and actions that we set for our policies and programs. We need to develop specific timelines and commitments that must be included in our housing element report. Now I'd like to just give you an overview of some of the community engagement work that's already been done, led by Barry Miller and the city staff. We've done quite a bit so far. Starting back in November of this last year, 2021, the city formed a housing element working group, which represents a variety of organizations that represent a variety of populations. And since last year, the working group has met 7 times. In addition, there have been a number of sessions and meetings with various groups and organizations to educate, inform, and gain insight into the needs of people who live and work here in San Rafael. Moving forward, staff will be engaging with the working group to identify and collaborate on creating specific focus groups with targeted outreach approaches to groups who have not historically participated in housing element conversations. Those groups who often have very special housing needs related to housing include people experiencing homelessness, people experiencing at-risk housing, large families, employees working for our local businesses, and city employees who do not live in Marin County. Data and mapping will help inform us about how we identify our sites and populations in neighborhoods who are highly resourced and those neighborhoods that are much more underserved. And we're going to take a look at this data. I warn everybody, I'm a little bit of a data geek, so I promise not to dwell on these things, but I'll just give you an oversight because I just love all this data. Okay, anyways, so just in general, and some of you have seen this before, overall, San Rafael's population has increased and has become much more diverse over the last 20 years. The number of Asians, people who identify as two races and our Latinx populations have all increased. On the other hand, our African American and American Indian populations and our white populations have actually decreased. In general, San Rafael is much more diverse than the county. No surprise there as a whole. One of our more diverse populations is our younger population. That could provide us with some opportunities to think about, if we just heard, creative solutions to housing with our younger demographics. San Rafael's housing stock is also much more diverse than the counties as a whole, with more than 50% representing housing stock that is not single-family homes. That said, the number of new housing that has actually been developed in the last 20 years, continues to decline. And of course, nothing indicates more how clearly there is a need for affordable housing at all income levels than when we identify that a family of four in Marin County can earn up to $146,000 a year and qualify for affordable housing. And before I jumped on the screen, I did an update because I knew we had one. The update is in for 2022. Now you can earn up to $166,000 a year for a family of four and qualify for affordable housing. I love doing on my community groups. I always say, raise your hand if you qualify, and then you really get to see who it really is. And as you can see, renters are more significantly overburdened than our homeowners are. While the vast majority of our homeowners in San Rafael live in 3 and 4 bedroom homes, renters occupy a wide range of housing types, but the majority are living in 0 to 2 bedroom apartments. And while the average rent in Marin increased by 91% from 2009 to 2019, it increased by only 36% in our income. And I think, and I know it's 2019 data, I think it's fair to assume that, as you all know, the rent increases have actually increased even more than that. When we look at area median income, we see that there are households at all races in San Rafael that are above 100% of AMI, right? So there's no group that doesn't have people who are 100% above AMI, and yet the majority of our Latinx and our African American households are renters. And that's something, again, that we need to look at and address and just sort of start digging in as to why that is. Taking a look at affordable housing, housing affordability, according to HUD, affordable housing should not exceed 30% of household income. And yes, that includes your property tax for all you homeowners out there. It's 30% of your household income. That means for a household of one, the monthly housing cost should not be greater than $2,561 a month. For a family of four, it shouldn't be more than $3,669 a month. So these local figures, and we looked at these folks specifically in San Rafael, and you can see that most of the people, including our high school teachers, are spending much more than 30% of their household income on housing. Veronica Tam, who I don't know if all of you met, she's amazing, and she's a consultant that the county has hired. And if I were all of you, it's a complete advantage of her knowledge. It's a crazy brain that deals with data and all this AFFH work. And she is available to the Planning Commission, as you all know, as a resource. And I would say completely tap into that. Veronica has provided us with some maps showing housing in San Rafael in different geographical areas. And Barry Miller, who has done an amazing job of presenting this mapping information, is what I'm going to show you right now. So you can see the variance between neighborhoods and where we all live, if we all live. So this first map shows us race by census tract. Okay, and I don't think it's a surprise for anybody here to understand that red circle, I'm pointing to it, we can't see. That red circle there is the canal area where we have our greatest concentration of people of color. This map will help us identify where our residents with disabilities live. Now, people living with disabilities is a protected class. It is a specific outreach that we will be engaging with. There's some great organizations here in San Rafael that I've worked with for years who we really are going to have conversations about special housing needs and some of the challenges. But with disabilities also include our senior members in general, because oftentimes it's senior disabled housing that we refer to. So that's important to understand because we need to look at, some of the seniors' proximity to shopping and to banking and to transportation. Median household income is broken down by community. For those of you who live in San Rafael, you can see where you live. I did this. It was really kind of fun. You should spend a little time and you'll be surprised probably about things. It shows you which communities have high and lower income. And while residents in all parts of San Rafael need to access jobs, this map shows which neighborhoods have better access to jobs and employment. AFFA requires us to identify the high resource neighborhoods in the city. And we can see that the canal area, and I guess we identify it as Southeast San Rafael, are neighborhoods with the poorest economic outcomes. And high resource areas, of which a lot of San Rafael is, right? I mean, if you just look at it, a lot of San Rafael is considered high resource, but high resource areas are often associated with high educational outcomes. And we see, again, as similar as we saw in the previous slide, that communities who identify sort of with low resources are also the ones that identify with the lower educational. As mentioned earlier, housing cost burdens must be identified by neighborhood. And much of the city has a relatively low housing cost burden, while the canal, again, falls within the higher cost burden neighborhoods. And displacement. Displacement means that in certain communities, some communities are experiencing rent increases that are above the county's average, right? Above the county's median rent increase. And in 2021, there were no census tracts in San Rafael that were vulnerable to displacement, but now the canal area meets that criteria. So I just showed you some maps and some data, didn't bore a lot of you, but along with what we're doing with our community engagement work, that mapping and that data should help inform us and shape what policies and programs and actions we want to put in our housing element. The identification of the goals that we're going to develop through your commission, as well as with our community engagement and certainly the working group. These goals and actions need to meet specific guidelines by HCD. In addition, they should also include some strategies, some very specific strategies, such as mobility strategies, which allow individuals and families more choice in their housing. We have to come up with some place-based strategies that improve housing, education, employment, and transportation in some of our under-resourced neighborhoods. We need to develop some anti-displacement strategies, which includes providing housing that's safe and healthy and affordable at all income levels, and that makes communities less vulnerable to increased housing costs. And we also need to consider our fair housing enforcement, which includes working with our local agency, Fair Housing in Northern California, to continue to do some education and inform people and advocate who can advocate for themselves. And at this point, that concludes my presentation. And at this time, I'll take any questions that you have. And again, thank you for your time.
Thank you, Liz. That was a really great report and you did a great job of looking at it. We have a lot of challenges, but hopefully we can rise to them. Do any commissioners have any questions for staff on this? Looks like we don't have any questions. So we'll go ahead and move on to the Directories Report.
Thank you.
Thank you, Liz.
Thank you, Liz. That was great. Catching up here. Okay, Directors Report. So was it last week on June 6th, the City Council passed some changes to some of the boards and commissions. including the Planning Commission. So moving forward, there will be 4 representatives, I mean, 1 each from each of the districts, and then 3 at-large representatives. Changes will start coming in as you all are going out. So none of you will be kicked out for this, but the idea is to have a greater representation from all segments of the city. So I think that will be exciting. The other thing, just more of a staffing issue, I just wanted to say we've extended an offer that was accepted for a new senior planner. So she's going through the background checks. So I'm very excited, and we'll be announcing her name, and hopefully she'll be before you soon. And I'm just super excited about that. So I just wanted to share, since you will be part of that, just that dialogue with her. And that's all I have tonight.
Thank you, Leslie. It'll be good to have more people here, especially in the summer. Do any of the planning commissioners have any communication? No communication? Go ahead.
I just have a question about the design review board. Like when are they involved and when are they not? Just for some clarification for future meetings.
Yeah. So one thing, there was a link to the pilot program, the staff report, in the staff report. In the staff report, there was a link to the staff report that went to City Council. But that said, it is for housing developments between 2 and 10 units, and also certain housing units that would do an addition of like about 40% on an existing. I don't know that by heart, but the idea would be it would be for the kind of small to mid-size housing projects that you would normally see in front of Planning Commission. It's not elevating any to Planning Commission. What it is doing is incorporating the design review into this meeting to hopefully streamline the process to have 1 meeting, as opposed to having them have 2. And I thought tonight went very well. So here's hoping it just gets better from here. That was amazing. And
same, yeah. Oh, sorry, Samina.
Oh, not a problem. I think it's worth mentioning that the timeline between going from DRB to Planning Commission, there's a lot of time that lapses to get the next meeting calendared. So, it's not just streamlining in terms of review, but I think it allows applicants to move through the process much more quickly and be able to get projects built more quickly. So hopefully that'll be something good that comes out of this.
Yeah. I thought it was super helpful. So thank you.
Sure.
Coming from the architect and a former DRB member. So
I know.
Oh, really?
Yeah, that's why I knew. That's why I knew them. I was saying hi to them. Yeah, I was on the DRB before I joined the Planning Commission.
Oh, you were? Okay, wonderful.
Yeah. It was fun. Okay, well, I think that's all we have for tonight. We'll go ahead and adjourn the meeting, and hopefully everyone has a nice evening.
And thank you, Vice Chair Saudi, for running the meeting. That was awesome.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.
You all
Thanks, both of you.
here tonight. Okay.
Bye.
Take care.
Take care, everybody.
Everyone. Good night.
Bye.
Thank you.